Just testing our audio on YouTube. We should be starting in about 15 minutes. If you are watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and join us in the live chat. And if you want to join us on Zoom, just log on to your FinalWorks account and go to your account dashboard, as you'll see up here, account dashboard. And you can get the Zoom link there. All right, so we will be starting in a few minutes. Just go ahead and keep your attention here. We do have a 40% off Canvas sale going on through till tomorrow. Using a code Canvas40 at checkout. So just FYI, if you want, go ahead, copy that code, and you can use that to Friday. And we'll be starting shortly with Jim Landers. James, can you hear me?
Yep. Can you hear
All
me?
right. Yep, I hear you well. All right, just waiting for Jim. Got that all going, showing the 40% off sale going on through Friday on our Canvas. So we have that up on there. And we're already live on YouTube. If you're watching this before it is edited from the setup, you can always skip ahead to the start. I'll keep a start jump on there until the until we're edited on YouTube. Here we go. We're going to be going over photographing nature and flowers and just all the different styles. I actually have some questions there for uh, Jim to see if, just kind of destinations, not only locally here to San Antonio, but like all over the world. See where ideal locations for some great landscape photography.
Well, he has a thing coming up this summer.
Colorado, right?
Yeah, and I think it's probably an ideal type location for that type of photography. That might be part of the reason why he's covering this, because I think that's just in a few months away, I believe.
Yeah. One of the topics I thought right now coming up, well, one, just spring. So almost everybody in their areas during spring seems to have great locations to shoot. So you can either do this where you were at or destination. And if you want to practice alongside Jim with that trip he has going on, that's a good way to learn and get a takeout on that. Have you been on any of those, James?
No, I sure haven't. I I thought that would be kind of cool to do so, but I think we're going to be somewhere next, maybe in California next when that occurs.
Well, waiting for you to do a Greece trip so you can do some good landscape photography there and some
The parts
cityscape.
of, when you think of Greece, you think, okay, take pictures of those islands and photograph those islands. There's these iconic locations and sunsets over the Mediterranean, but really there's some areas in Greece that are just phenomenal. And it doesn't look like what you would think of as Greece. It's, we're talking about the western parts, the northwestern, which is very forested, mountainous.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have very, kind of these very lush valley areas that are and more flat areas in the eastern part. It's very, very diverse. And I've never been to the eastern part, but I've been to the northwestern part, as you get close to the Albanian border. And it is just, it is some of the prettiest country in Europe, I think.
It's on my bucket list. It's one of the places I want to go. Like I said, I really think destinations right now, Instagram has just been like my bucket list on all of these different places, because you're able to see, like you said, more than just the traditional spots that you see, like the white, buildings with the blue rooftops kind of stuff. And when you think of Greece, so yeah, like I said, you got a connection there, so you should go and bring us back some pretty fun.
Yeah, actually, that part of Greece is where it's family's from. It's the area where Alexander the Great's mother came from historically, and so it's known for that region. But that particular area, just because the way it looks, when my grandfather moved to the U.S. Or my dad's side of the family moved to the U.S. One of the places they really liked was upstate Pennsylvania around Allentown, the coal mining region, because it reminded them so much of that same part of Greece. Yeah, because the kind of mountainous and forested. So yeah.
So did Greeks invent landscape photography?
Oh, absolutely. I tell everyone we invented everything.
Yep. Everything's from Greece.
Yeah. Everything was invented by that.
That's great. Yeah, I wanted to kind of get some of those, just because we always have people who watch these that's one thing about these being on YouTube. It's that anybody from any part of the world can access them. So we're just going to see any cool destination place. Well, what would be destination to us, but other people, this may be their hometown areas, and they get fabulous landscape photography. And actually, landscape photography, I mean, to me, it's one of the most, I would think, sought after photography to buy as prints, commercially and just, in people's personal residencies, because it's a inspiration. It takes people out. It's an extra window in your home when you have like a landscape print from a photo in there. So I think this is a perfect topic to have to lead to even doing prints of people's photography. Let's see if we get Jim on. Just waiting for him to join us. Also going to ask him what kind of gear, kind of taking that out. I've heard from a couple of landscape photographers that have shot like more remote places and the stuff they have to pack. And I had never thought about needing like weights for your tripods in some of the places. So I was like, wow, I never even would have thought about that.
Yeah.
And the way they set up their filters to take with them too. So, because some people still, set up their own filters for their lenses. And I think a lot of people actually, don't think about the filters because everything's so digital, and you think about fixing it kind of in post of using a photo editor and doing that. So
Yeah, I think the most commonly filters are used just like your basic filter. It's used to protect the lens. That's really about it. It's not really used for much else.
yeah.
I do that right anymore. You don't see a whole lot of photographers using filters like they used to. I don't think.
Yeah. We have one photographer on Geo Galleries that he did we did an interview with him on a First Friday, and he was talking and showing us the lenses that he uses when because he's like saying how the light can hit harsh right there, and you want the rocks and the mountainside of this thing, but you also want that blue of the sky. And he would use those filters to kind of balance it out and get those shots. And I was like, wow, you don't hear anybody using filters anymore. So that was it.
Not like they used to.
Not like they used to, no. I mean, like I said, everything you can do now. I remember I used to have to do, I fell in love with solarizing film in high school. And I mean, that is such a hard technique because I mean, that's it. You get one shot and you ruin your film if you don't do it right. So everything on that roll is gone. So, I used to give myself like 15 count rolls before I would go do that because, oh my God, I remember the first time I did that on a 36 exposure roll and I ruined the whole entire roll. So it's neat now that you can kind of just go into Photoshop and kind of come up with these darkroom effects.
Yeah, I like the effects in Lightroom. I think I think Photoshop is great, and a lot of the same tools are in Photoshop. I just like the way you can access them and apply them in Lightroom, the different effects and filters and so forth. You can really kind of tweak it and see how it's impacting the photo. I just like the interface much more on Lightroom when it comes to making those type of changes and adjustments to photos.
Yeah, just making sure Jim got that Zoom link. I think I see both of you on that.
Usually he's joining us about this time.
Yeah. So I just texted him, make sure, did you get the Zoom link okay? Which is funny. We had that with Gabe. But he was like turning things off, thinking time zone issues. So that was funny. So, but Jim is in our time zone, so he's here locally. So hopefully gets there, and he's pretty good about all of this stuff. He does so many. I don't know how he keeps track of all of the lives he does now. He's like on, I think, every day at this point.
I think so.
There he is.
And then he has his regular classes.
Yeah. He's like the Bob Ross of photography here.
Yeah.
Here he comes.
Make sure we got the incredible gym liners or just the regular gym liners today.
We need the caffeinated or decaf, huh?
Yeah.
That's funny. So it's been a busy day.
Yes.
Good day.
Wow.
Good day.
Let's see.
That's always good.
My video not coming on?
There you are. Here, let me go ahead and stop share here.
So what you've been doing today? Why is it?
Well, I got to visit with for 17 years I had a physical school. People could come to me. You guys know about that. But recently, COVID decided I didn't need that office. And, I kind of agreed. And so I've moved everything online, which is totally out of my comfort zone. I do things in person. And so it's been a fun learning experience and growing, asking questions. But today I got a chance to visit with someone who's made over $100 million with his online education.
Wow.
Now, he's been doing it a long time. He's been doing online education since 96, and he's been doing education since 76. So he's been doing it a long time, but I got an opportunity to visit with him. That was fantastic. And then I had lunch with someone who has done similar things, not to the same extent, but just wonderful people to get a chance to visit with. And then right before this, I was at a fundraiser. So boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
And after this, I have another class.
Oh boy, it's going to be a busy day today.
So yes, I hope we did get the caffeinated gym line.
Well, yeah, we'll see.
So
What am I teaching today?
So so I'm curious, and I have my camera off because I'm having to get up and get down and get up, get down because I'm in the process of creating ICC profiles which is a fun project. But let me ask you, what did you learn about, or what can you share from your experience with meeting with this gentleman that's been very successful in the realm of online education? And
good question. His is quite different than mine. And so there's some things that are built into what he does that I wouldn't be able to apply at all to what I do. Partially because in the industry that he's in, which I won't mention, in the industry he's in, there are educational requirements. You have to do continuing education. In photography, there's no education at all. You could just say, hey, I'm a photographer, make a couple of business cards and you're on your way. You don't even have to own a camera. You could borrow that from somebody. That's very unusual compared to a lot of other industries. Whether someone feels that's good or bad, it's what it is. But he gave some suggestions on, things that he feels like would work for me. For instance, having some kind of a combo hybrid, a live event and live streamed event where I bring in vendors that photographers would have an interest in learning more about. And I get together maybe 10 different vendors, so 12 different ones where I'm leveraging their lists. And so I have, my list plus the 10, 12 other companies. And so now I have a potential for 10 times or more the number of people in the audience than I would have just by myself. And he suggested that I charge each one of the vendors and that I charge each one of the students to participate in this educational event. And he said, make it a all day thing, maybe lunch in the middle. So he mentioned a bunch of things. There's one of them.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah. So yeah, I think really, once you start implementing techniques like that, you really change the kind of dynamic of how you're going to be managing these classes as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So Yeah,
I mostly just teach the business side now. I've got over 300 hours worth of educational material, but at least half of it is on the photography side. And the other half, of course, is on the business of photography side.
sure.
And the business of photography is a lot easier to teach online, at least from my point of view, than the photography side. Like teaching Photo 101, I've got to pull out the camera and show this button and that button, and here's what the changes are. And while I have done one of those on a live, like on a Zoom call, and the students thought it was great, but I was able to compare to actually doing it in person.
Mhm.
Doing it in person is so much better.
Well,
They're both
yeah.
good, but
Yeah.
in person, so much better with photography.
Yeah, it's because when you're teaching a business oriented class, you can use a lot more abstracts, whereas when you're teaching a more photography workshop, you're having to demonstrate and show examples, and so it's kind of harder to do, I think, online.
Yeah, we were just
That's right.
talking about, because we're doing photographing landscapes, flowers and nature today. And we were talking about your upcoming trip. Basically,
Colorado.
yeah. And how really this kind of goes into what a great opportunity that is to kind of be on hand and take amazing photos like this.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we try to go to Colorado once a year, and it's really a vacation for Robin and I, but we have a class while we're there, and that helps pay for our trip. So
Which is also a topic you've done here before.
Yeah. So it's pretty cool how we've done that several times where we've gone on a trip, but did some work while we were there. Of course, I actually really love teaching. I love sharing this stuff. And so while yes, it fits in the work category, if you enjoy doing it, you enjoy doing it. And so we've done several trips over the years where we did something like we maybe did a family portrait or two to cover the cost. We've done classes. We once did a class at a mansion called Elfindale in Springfield, Missouri. And we had 27 students showed up, totally paid for our trip.
Wow. Yep, that's a great way to hustle there, Jim. Gotta get it every day.
Yeah, so we have Jim Landers, the hustler, today.
Well, that's funny.
Gotta put it in there. What do you call it? So yeah, James, you want to give a brief introduction there of Jim and how we got into doing these, just in case this is anybody's first time watching our Photo Tips Monthly.
Sure. So I'll turn my video on just for. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Okay, I guess.
Oh, I think I have
that's all right.
over to Jim being the host.
Oh, do I have it now?
That's okay. That's right.
How do I?
I don't need the video. So we did. How long have we been doing this now? It's been over a year. I know, maybe about a year and a half. So we've been doing once a month. We started with something we call First Tuesday, which happens every first Tuesday of the month. And we thought, but it's more general in the topics that it covers, and a lot of it is oriented to artists as well as photographers, but it might cover things from, how to choose the best paper for your prints to business ideas. But we thought, we need to have something a little bit more photocentric because we do have a lot of photographers. A lot of people don't see Finer Works as a photo lab, but technically we are a photo lab. We do everything just about everything your typical photo lab will do, and plus some. So we're kind of like a photo lab on steroids in many cases. So, and we know many of our customers are photographers, and we thought, well, this is a great opportunity for budding photographers, get some additional information, how to get the best photos possible. and to learn about photography. And it's not just photographers. There's a lot of this information carries over into traditional artwork, such, for painters, people that draw, digital artists, everything from composition to capturing subject matter that they might utilize, or even capturing digital images of their original painting, their original artwork, so they can sell it better, or they can turn it into print. So I've known Jim for gosh, it's going close to 20 years now. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Jim was the first person on my list when I thought, I think we need to provide something, of interest to our photography community. So here we are.
Jim's been a customer also from Final Works, and just being able to share the information and knowledge that you have so freely is amazing. And you offer these also as courses through your school, but so we really appreciate you sharing this on this venue. So with that, Jim, if you want to go ahead and start today's topic, I already have shared your file on our YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and just look on your chat, and you should see the link in there as well to get to the presentation.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, James. I appreciate that warm welcome and kind introduction. And thank you for all that you're doing for the creatives out here, the artists of all types, of all mediums. Because what you're doing, just with your everyday stuff is fantastic. But you're taking this a step further. You're doing things that actually help us out. You're having this and other types of education and events, things to open up open up our minds, cause us to learn something maybe we didn't know before, or enhance what we already do know. This is over and above. It's not what's expected from someone who's printing that beautiful photograph that I just created. And so I want to, from as on behalf of creatives, I guess especially photographers and artists, say thank you for all that you do to help us out.
Hi.
So today we're going to be talking about amazing outdoor photography. So landscape, nature, animals, that kind of thing. For those of you who have heard me speak before, you already know how I feel about photography. But those of you who have not, I want you to know something. I believe that the best photographs bring out emotion and convey a story that causes a greater understanding. I believe that it's our responsibility as image creators to make sure that our images say something to the intended viewer, that they have some sort of emotional impact. It may take years and it will most likely be inconsistent, but when we master this goal, I believe that the images that we create as photographers are no longer pictures or photos or pics or whatever it is you want to call them. I believe at that point, they're elevated to a photograph, a piece of art. People take pictures. We as photographers create images or photographs. As a photographer, your medium for creation is your camera. It's just a tool. You cannot take something that does not yet exist. It must be created before it can be taken. So I like to recommend that you, instead of saying taking a picture, you use the word make or create, something that more actually identifies what it is that you're doing. By the way, if there was a photograph on someone's wall and you thought, ooh, I like that, and you're the kind of person who's okay with stealing stuff, then you could take that picture and that would be correct English. But when you are creating, You're thinking about all the different variables, the light, the shadows, the shutter speed, the f-stop, the focal length that you're going to use, the color balance, all the different variables. You're not just taking something, you're creating art. I'm going to share with you today my 11 considerations to amazing outdoor photography. And I say considerations because this is art. This is subjective. You can choose whatever you want. You can use whatever tools you want. There is a near infinite number of tools that a photographer can use. Tools both that you find in your camera case, your camera bag, like lenses, filters, but also mental tools. Knowing how to use the tools in a combination, knowing to move over a little bit, get higher, change the time of day. Those are all in the tool category. Let's talk about 11 different ones. First one is planning and control. Now, let's, for those of you who don't have the handout, I'm going to share my screen so you can see what it is that I'm looking at. So this now is going to be my screen. So here are my 11 considerations to amazing outdoor photography. And before I go on, I want to ask Melissa real quick, is this large enough or do I need to change its size?
You can increase its size just a little bit.
Let's see.
That way, if anybody is watching on a smaller device on YouTube, it'll be a little more filled in the screen.
How's that?
Better.
Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome. Good. Okay. So first one, number one, is planning and control. Now, I'm sure you've created wonderful images without planning at all, just holding the camera and pressing and making a good image because the technology in a camera is there. It has the ability to create pretty okay images, but the more you learn about all the huge number of combinations of tools, the more you are able to create. And so if you take a moment and plan, you may wind up with, for instance, plenty of time to create wonderful sunrises and sunsets. They don't last long. Plan where you're going to go. The location can make a huge difference. Always look for opportunities. How about find a beautiful and interesting place that will make a great foreground? Choose a location where you will be able to see the sun go all the way down to the horizon. Now, this is one that people often say, well, where else would you be? What if the place where you've chosen, there's a building or there's something that is not interesting in that spot? You don't have to be in that spot if you've planned ahead. You can move to a different spot that doesn't have that uninteresting thing in it, or you can purposefully move to something that you find interesting. It could be a statue, it could be a sculpture, there could be all kinds of things. It could be people playing in the foreground, whatever it is you want to do, but plan it ahead of time so you know. And I would suggest that you look for opportunities to include silhouettes. And now this is when the sun's going down or when the sun's coming up is when I'm talking about those. But the silhouette is where the light from behind the subject is bright. So therefore the light on your side of the subject is dark. There's not enough light on them because the light's coming from the opposite side. So silhouettes can look amazing. Not always, but it's a cool tool. Then think about what time of day is going to have the best light. So is it in the morning? Is it in the evening? It may be during the middle of the day, but not usually. Some of the best times of the day are the first hour of light and the last hour of light. And I bet you've heard of this before because some people call this the golden hour or the blue hour. I'm going to suggest that you call it neither because the hour is neither all golden nor all blue. It's both. So therefore, I would recommend that you called it the magic hour. That way it includes all of the above. Now, there's a lot of ways to find when the sun is going to rise and when it's going to set. Local newspapers will tell you that. But how many of us read newspapers anymore? How about weather stations? How about your Google Calendar? Yeah, you can find that information there. You have to add it. It's not there to start with. You'd have to add it. But there are apps, just like for everything else in the world. There are apps for this too. And there's one that's called Golden Hour. And you can go to their website, golden-hour.com. And there's a bunch of other ones out there. There's Photo Pills. There's the Photographer's Ephemeral. Maybe it's Ephemeris. Oh, I've forgotten which. But either way, there's apps out there that help you judge time of day so that you're in the right place at the right time based on what it is you're trying to accomplish. That's where the planning and control come in. Now, let's talk about weather and time of day. So weather, some of the most interesting skies that I've ever seen occur either during or after a storm. So I know, it's raining, you put your camera away. I don't know, maybe every once in a while, don't put it away. Just stay by the window. Look what's going on outside. Sometimes it is just amazing. Every once in a while, I've got a portrait session scheduled. And because it's the weather's not looking good, we postpone it and have to do it later. And every once in a while, some of the time, it's just amazing. It's beautiful. It opened up and the sun in the sky are perfect. And so those times when I didn't postpone it and I went ahead and did it anyway, just in case, I've been so glad I did it. And those other times where it was too late to make the change, oh man, this would have been so perfect. So sometimes you don't know. But again, some of the most interesting skies that I've ever seen happen before, during, and after a storm. Now, if you're photographing the sunset or sunrise, those times of the year where there's smoke in the sky because of fires, those suns. So the fires, that's not a good thing, of course, but they sometimes enhance the sunset. And so we're making lemonade out of those lemons that of the fires. Time of day, as you know, as the day goes on, the light changes. Maybe right now, maybe in a few hours is best. But we want to think about it. How about sunny days? Mornings and early evenings are often the best time of day. And around midday is not usually the best. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, though. The lighting is very contrasty, especially if there are no clouds in the sky. It's very bright where the sun is hitting, and those areas that are being blocked by the sun, the opposite side is in shadow. So very harsh lighting. Sometimes it looks amazing. And as far as sharpness, the more light, the sharper the image is. So you have certain advantages even with those disadvantages. There are times when it is totally appropriate to photograph during the day. I know a lot of photographers try to avoid that. Besides, I don't know where you're watching this from, but I live in San Antonio, Texas. And in San Antonio, during the heat of the summer, we don't want to go outside. We are so grateful for air conditioning. So early morning and late in the evening are, for the most part, our options here during the hottest times of the year. If you do need to photograph in a situation where you have heavy shadows because of the sun, then I do recommend that you use a fill flash if you're photographing portraits, if you're photographing people, and other things too. It depends on what you're photographing. But if you need more light in those shadow areas, if that's what you feel would improve the photograph, then a fill light takes care of that. So let's talk about what a fill light is. Fill, F-I-L-L, just means that you are filling in the shadows that the sun is creating with light. It's not the name of the flash. It's the result of the light of the flash. you're filling the shadows that the sun created. And so if you're photographing a couple and it's bright and sunny and you've got some shadows coming across their face, using that little pop-up flash on a lot of cameras, not all cameras have pop-up flashes. The more expensive the camera, the less likely it is to have a pop-up flash. You'd think the more you paid, the more you got. Those little pop-up flashes have very little use, but one of them is if you're photographing relatively close on a bright, beautiful sunny day, that pop-up flash works all right. And that's about the only time it works all right. It's just not a very good tool, but it's okay. It's fine for its purpose. It's just a lot of people don't realize that's its purpose. When you're photographing relatively close, like within 10 feet of you and the camera, you can fill in the shadows that the sun created. Use a fill flash. It's about overcast days. For a lot of photographers, this is their favorite because the lighting is even. The difference between the highlight areas and the shadow areas is reduced and sometimes almost eliminated. But in either way, it's softened. It's not harsh. Imagine the opposite. Let's say you've opened up your car door and you're looking at the shadow that your door is creating on the ground. It is easy to tell the difference between shadow and highlight. But now switch it in your mind to an overcast day. You might not even see the shadow from your door because of how soft the light is. Well, why is the light soft? Because it's coming from every direction. Cloud cover is like a soft box that's been put on a studio light. It softens the light, so it's harder to tell its direction. Now, when you have a softbox in a studio, it depends on the size of the softbox as to whether it has this effect you're looking for. The larger the light source, meaning you can have the light be a small thing, but the larger it's that you're spreading that light out over, the softer the image is going to become. But that's a studio, not for today. So overcast. Now, as far as your color balance, those of you who are following here, you can see you want to change your auto white balance to cloudy, maybe. Auto white balance does a pretty darn good job most of the time. If you're photographing in JPEG, this is important to you to pay attention to. If you're photographing in RAW, which generally speaking is the best file type, but if you're photographing in RAW, it doesn't matter what your color balance settings are on your camera, because that is something that even if you do change them in camera, your RAW setting will ignore your changes. What you're seeing on the little screen on the back of your camera, that is actually a JPEG. It's not RAW. So therefore, the changes that you've made in color balance when you're photographing in RAW will show up on that screen on the back of your camera. However, they do not show up when you load them into your computer, because it is in post when you're responsible for that particular variable. So you may choose to do that. I photograph mostly in RAW, but that doesn't mean that you need to also. There's certain advantages in post, in the post-production process, to using a RAW image file, and I want to take advantage of those advantages. However, if my goal was speed, if I was photographing an event, say a business event, and they need those photographs at the end of the event because they're going to show a slideshow before everybody goes. Well, I'm not going to do it in RAW. I'm going to do those in JPEG so that I can get those images to them as quickly as I possibly can. Taking out that step of post-production causes it to be much faster. But that's about the only reason I can think of where RAW is the better choice. It is absolutely easy. It's quick. It's the quickest one you can use if your goal is to put it up on Facebook. So there's certain reasons why I would absolutely choose a JPEG. But again, usually it's RAW. Now, how about a day where it is windy? All right, so this doesn't mix well when you're photographing flowers or anything that is kind of lightweight that's going to move with the wind. Wind doesn't mean it's bad. It doesn't mean stay inside. But if let's say you're a portrait photographer and you photograph women and they've got long hair, if it's a light wind, it kind of looks good. But if it's a good amount of wind, it ends the photo session. It has to be rescheduled. And most people don't really think about the wind as being something. You look outside, it's a beautiful day. You think this is going to be perfect. Well, man, an overcast, maybe almost rainy day was better than a windy day sometimes. But wind can cause a problem. Now, if I'm photographing flowers, there are ways to keep the flower a little bit more still when you're in the wind. One is you've got your back to the wind, that'll block some of it. But also I've seen someone, I haven't ever done this. They have this thing that connects to their tripod leg, and it clips onto the stem of the flower, holding it still. Now, some of them will do that whether there's wind or not, because there's always usually a little bit of wind. So there's something that some people do. And let's talk about rain. You know what? I think it's kind of fun to photograph in the rain. Now, that doesn't mean it's a heavy downpour. I don't want to risk hurting the camera, but most of our cameras are sealed against sprinkling. Now, heavy rain, they're not. I mean, it's probably not going to be a problem if it's a short period of time, but it's not something I would want to risk. But man, it's sometimes fun to photograph in the rain. Definitely, there's going to be fewer photographs created in the rain. So your images have some this additional ability to stand out. We have here in San Antonio, we have the annual San Antonio Photography Tournament. It happens rain or shine. It doesn't matter if it's a rainy day, a windy day, a bright, beautiful, sunny day. It doesn't matter what kind of day it is. That's part of the challenge. We deal with whatever it is that we've got. We hope that it's always a beautiful, sunny day, but we do it rain or shine, doesn't matter. We still do it. So get out there and try it. You may be surprised by the results. Now, you see on here, you can even carry a spray bottle to create rain droplets when it's not wet outside. You know, depending on what you're photographing, flowers is a great example. They look kind of good with water on them. You know, the dew of the morning. Well, you could create your own dew if there's not any. Fill a spray bottle with water. All right, number 3. Selecting the right subject. Now, yeah, we may take this one for granted. We think that's just how it happens. We're going to do that anyway. We think we have the eye to choose the right subject, and we know what angle to choose, right? Some do. Some of it's natural. Some don't. Either way, the subject, whether one or many, is the most influential part of your photograph. If everything else is perfect, exposure, composition, background, lighting, etc., but the petals of the flower you chose don't look right, then you might wind up with you may not wind up with the perfect image. But then again, you might. It depends on what story you're trying to tell. Therefore, whatever is right to you is what you're looking for. I generally like to find the perfect flower, but I may have a reason why I don't want to choose the perfect flower. Maybe I'm photographing. A friend of mine is oh man, starts with an E, entomologist. Is that the one that studies bugs? I think it is. If I've got the word wrong, it's maybe you guys know what it is. If I was photographing something for him and he wanted to cover a subject of these bugs are eating flowers, well, I'm going to find the bugs that the flowers, or I'm not going to find the bugs. I'm going to find the flowers that the bugs have eaten. So maybe it's about grasshoppers or something. Okay, then I'm going to look for that kind of thing. But how often do I do that? I've never done that. So I'm always looking for the perfect flower. But you want to choose the subject that helps tell whatever story you're trying to tell. Whatever it is you're trying to convey, you're looking for that. Now, again, this seems like, well, everybody does that, except everybody doesn't. I critique a lot of photographs. And when we're looking at the photographs, I might comment, was this the most beautiful one you could find? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I just saw this field of flowers and I just kind of zoomed in on that one. So we need to spend a little bit of time choosing that subject. And it's not always flowers, of course. Years ago, for about 12 years, I volunteered to teach at an event for 6th grade students where it's called Nature Venture. And for one week, it's actually short of a week, but still, I'm just going to say a week. 1 week they would come out to this ranch, and it had live water. There's a creek on it, and there were cliffs and boulders and all kinds of stuff. It was a pretty place, and so we'd walk around. And there was, I think, 30 different subjects that were being taught outside. Photography was one of them, obviously. And we would, I'd start off by just going over a few things about photography. I'd show them some old cameras in my camera collection, kind of like these right over here. This is real. That's not a background. We would walk around, and one of the things that I would point out to them is pay attention to everything. Don't just look at what's right here. We don't have blinders on, but some people, at least while they have their camera in their hand, it just appears that they do. Now they're looking like this, but it feels like they've got blinders on. And so I give them this heads up ahead of time, or I did. And I told them, along the path you're going to take is an example of why you should be looking all around you, not just what's right here in front, but what's behind you also. Because there is one point where we're coming around a corner, and if you look backwards, you're going to see something that you won't see if you look around the way we normally look around. So not only look where you're going, but where you've been. And even though I warned them ahead of time, by the time we got to that area, almost never, and it was every 45 minutes that I had, maybe it was every hour. Anyway, I had a new group. Every single one of them, almost all, did not look around like I suggested. When I was telling it, they were like, "Oh, yeah, of course. We do that." Okay. We'd come around. If they were to look back, we were coming from a non-trail area to a trail area. When we come onto it, if we were to just take a moment to look backwards, the trees, they were oak trees, just grew over the path. And it was dark, except at the end of the path, it was over at an angle, but it lit up the entire path. It's beautiful. And almost no one noticed it. So I would start walking backwards at that point, because I was looking to see if they were paying attention to this. And when everybody got on the path, I would stop. And I would then tell them, "All right, you need to be paying attention. Look all the way around you. I want you guys to turn around and see what you see." And everybody's like, "Oh, we would have missed that." Pay attention not only to where you're going, but where you've been. It's part of selecting the right subject. Let's talk about number 4, paying attention to your environment. Now, this, of course, goes, there's overlap here. You can see how this is both of these things. The cool thing about sunsets is that they not only create wonderful colors in the sky in front of you, but they also provide a beautiful golden light that is amazing. I want you to keep an eye out for other opportunities around you, not just in front of you, like I mentioned before. You don't want a beautiful image messed up by something you could have easily fixed. I want you to check your background. Pay attention to it. If you're photographing a person or a flower or a rock or a tree, that's your subject, but pay attention to what's behind it also. Usually a simple and uncluttered background is best to enhance the subject, because it stands away from the background. But the background must be maybe better enhanced with a background that helps tell a story, so that you know where you're at, or whatever it is you're trying to convey. And if you find the background is just plain bad, or you simply want to isolate the subject, then do what I do sometimes. And I've used a black poster board to totally take out the background. In high school, this was just a few years ago. This would have been in the middle 80s. I wanted to photograph this Easter lily. Now, for those of you who celebrate Easter, that is a popular time to see Easter lilies. It's a white flower with a very saturated yellow pollen in it, and very green stalks and leaves. Beautiful plant, and the flower is big. It's kind of a trumpet shape, but this particular one was in the ground. and I was photographing it, but the stuff that was behind it, I found distracting. Now, I don't know that everybody would agree that it was distracting, but to me, it was distracting. It was other plants. It was a fence. It was the ground that it was planted in. So just a lot of variables that I felt was a distraction. And so I put this black poster board behind it and isolated it. And the only thing in the photograph that you could see was the flower and the stems. Totally separated it from its background. So there's a tool you might choose to use. How about angles? Consider getting down on the ground or getting up on top of a ladder. Is there a foreground that might enhance your subject? Maybe considering putting the foreground out of focus. Up to you. Details, details, details. I want you to pay attention to all those little details that you come across. Flowers, rocks, signs, anything that catches your eye, and the things that are around it. If I'm photographing a family, let's say it's an extended family. So we've got grandma who's, let's say it's 4 generations. So maybe you've got a great grandma who's maybe 80, 90 years old. Let's say 95. And you have a little one who's 4 and or 5, and both the great grandma loves playing piano and the great granddaughter likes playing piano. I'm going to photograph them, if we're doing this in their home, at the piano, and I want to show both their hands. But what if they like working outside? Maybe they like planting flowers. I want to get them doing that. I want to show their hands. Grandma's hands look quite a bit different than that 4 or 5-year-old girl's hands. But man, do they make a good photograph. And those are details. If you're doing portrait work, you're usually thinking about faces. But portrait just means to portray, to tell a story. I'm trying to portray them and their story, not mine. I mean, I include my technical knowledge into that. But, you know, it's interesting. Photographers ask me often, what's the best place in the area to photograph a senior portrait? What's the best place in the area to photograph a family portrait? And my response every time is a place that means something to them, an emotional connection. That to me is the number one place, not something pretty, because anybody could be photographed there. Something that means something special to them. And then use the tools that you know how to understand because of all the photography classes you've taken to be able to tell that story, their story, in a way that it's theirs. It's unique. It's custom. Total custom. Not custom as in, well, it's different faces this time. I'm not sure that fits the custom category. Kind of does, but barely. Create for the person you're trying to portray. Find out who they are. Sit down with them. If I'm photographing a family portrait, I go to their home and I find out who they are, what they're proud of, what they see for their future, their vision of their future, what it's about. What is it about? I also want to find out where it's going to go on their wall. I need to know ahead of time. Is this going to be a vertical or horizontal? I need to prepare ahead of time. If I have the ability to prepare, then I need to prepare. Why go in blindly? It's not just about a pretty picture. It's about conveying their story, portraying who they are. So, of course, knowing where it's going to wind up on their wall is part of the equation. Why would I leave that one out? If I leave that out, I'm just creating for me, and that's fine too. But if I'm doing it on commission, I'm working for someone to create something specifically for them, to portray them, I need to know who they are, and I need to create something that is a collaborative work. They're part of the art. It isn't just me, not in that situation. Number 5, steady your camera. So if any of you watching are a salesperson or owner of a tripod company, you'll appreciate that I appreciate keeping your camera steady. Your camera's got to be still. Now, always? No, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're photographing cars driving down the access road and you want to pan, then you're following them with motion. You're getting the car still and the background that is still to you in motion in the photograph. All right. So there's an example. You may not want a tripod, but every other thing, use a tripod. Yes, I understand sometimes it's inconvenient. And yes, I do take mine off of the camera, off the tripod sometimes. I do, a lot of times. But you need this as one of the tools in your toolbox. We don't want any motion blur coming from the camera unless we've planned for it to be there. And there's several ways to make that happen, but putting the camera on something steady, like a tripod, is the best way. If you don't have your tripod with you, you're going on a hike and you didn't even bring a travel pod, then a table, a rock, boulder, a fence post, whatever is in that space in the area that you're in, to use that to steady your camera if you have that as an option. If you don't, then holding your camera correctly is important. Now, what does holding your camera correctly mean? Well, first, you have your camera in your hand with the grip and you've got your finger on the trigger. That part's obvious. Where's your other hand go? Doesn't go on the lens like this with your finger up like you're having tea. It goes underneath so that you can support it. So it goes like that. And you put it up against your head. You've got your elbows into yourself, your camera touching your head. You have yourself a human tripod at that point because of the 3 points of touch. Number 6, composition. Composition. Choose your location. For small subjects, consider getting on their level. Flowers look good from the ground's point of view. Consider that as an option. Horizontal versus vertical. Most sunsets and sunrises are created horizontally. And most of the time, that is the way that they should be created. But they're not limited to that. There may be a very good reason to turn your camera vertical. You may be creating an image for someone, a commission. Maybe it's for someone's wall in their office, for their home, and you know the dimensions, the space it's going to go in. So you create for that purpose. Most of the time, most of the time we're creating a sunset or sunrise. Yeah, it's going to be horizontal, but you don't have to keep it that way. You may give a new perspective, something that's interesting. Make sure the horizon is straight, though. That's just my opinion. I know not everybody agrees with my opinion, and that's fine. But I believe horizons should be straight. I believe bodies of water should be straight. So photographing a lake, an ocean, I want that to be level for me. That's what ideal is. That's what correct is for this guy. You can have your own rules, but I want bodies of water to be straight, and I want sunsets and sunrises to be straight. That's just me. Rule of thirds is a composition tool that is, as far as compositional rules, I think it's a good idea to learn the composition rules. There's a ton of them. I also believe that once you've learned them, set them aside and do whatever you feel is best. So rule of thirds, if it looks good as rule of thirds, using that rule, I'm going to go over it in a moment, then use that. If you don't think that looks good, don't use it just because it's a rule. You're an artist. You do whatever you think looks good for whatever intended purpose you have for it, assuming you have an intended purpose. Rule of thirds. So this is off center. And if you were to divide the frame into thirds, you've got 2 lines horizontal, 2 lines vertical. At those points of intersection, place your subject. That's rule of thirds. How about something in the foreground? Find something interesting for your foreground. This helps add depth. It helps add dimension sometimes. For example, a structure, a lake, a person. So when you add a person in, you can help with the size of something. Someone was showing me a photograph not that long ago where I couldn't tell the size of the thing I was looking at, and it really didn't strike me as something that I needed to know. I just looking at it and it looked interesting. And the very next image that this person shared with me had a person in it. This thing was way larger than I thought it was. So having something in there to help show scale might help tell the story that you're trying to convey. Keep it simple. Avoid clutter. There are a lot of images that have something interesting, but if there's so much stuff around it, it could get lost. Now, you can keep it simple using tools on your camera, such as a shallow depth of focus, where you've only got a small depth of focus. The smaller the depth of focus, the lower your f-stop number is. So if my goal is a shallow depth to my focus, then I'm going to use a small number. So small number, small f-stop number, small depth of focus. Large f-stop number, large depth of focus. If I'm photographing, let's say I've got some friends that came in from out of town and I want to take them to the Riverwalk and to see the Alamo. If I choose a small numbered f-stop and I've got them out in front of the Alamo in a way that I can see the whole Alamo, I've got to have them a good distance away from the Alamo. I mean, not like a football field away, but still maybe 30 feet away. Then I can purposefully choose an f-stop that's a low number and get just them in focus. But then my background gets blurry. I don't know that I would want that for the Alamo. If I was going to the Grand Canyon, do I want the Grand Canyon to go out of focus? So while choosing a low numbered f-stop really works in some situations, it's just a tool. You choose whatever tool helps tell your story. And I mentioned this earlier, silhouettes. If you need a point of interest when you are photographing a sunset or a sunrise, man, a silhouette can do that. It's add some context. One of the best ways to add some context or something interesting to a sunrise or sunset is to incorporate some sort of silhouette. Now, the sunset or sunrise might look amazing on its own, but if it doesn't, or if it helps tell the story, add something of interest into it. This could be people, this could be trees, structures, hills and mountains, a pier, whatever you want to use. Choose the angle of your background. Choose a different angle. Everyone takes their photographs at eye level. One of the teachers that I work with calls that pedestrian level. So if you can imagine that you're on a photo tour of downtown San Antonio, and someone's just walking you around, all the images are going to be created from right here. That means they're all going to look pretty much the same. So maybe get low on purpose. Maybe get up on something. Maybe even raise the camera above your head. Yep, you won't be able to look through the viewfinder then. Some cameras have that flip down screen, so that's an advantage in that situation. Watch out for distracting backgrounds. Watch out for things that look like they're growing out of the head of your subject. Stop signs, trees. Getting closer. Use your zoom. Crop out things that distract from your picture. Keep in mind that many point and shoot cameras, cameras that don't allow for interchangeable lenses, they have one fixed lens on it, cannot focus any closer than 4 feet. Not all of them, but some of them. That might be, if you're trying to photograph something that's relatively close, you're trying to photograph someone's ring, that may be something that you have to back away from. There are some lenses that you have to be a certain distance away. Even your own eyes. As you get older, it's not your arms that have gotten shorter. Your closest focusing distance changes over time. So can you focus if your hand is that close? No, you can tell it's a hand, but it's not in focus. You've got to pull it away a certain distance before it comes into focus. Our lenses that we buy for our cameras, the same. They have a closest focusing distance, and every single one of them, it has it listed on the surface, the barrel of the lens. Might be something you didn't even know was there, but every single one of them, a lot of times it's on the bottom side of the lens. but it's printed on the lens. Sometimes it's on the outside when you're looking into the lens. There's some print in there. There's other pieces of information that are there too, but this isn't the lens class. So let's see. Okay, this one's silly, but cameras come in vertical too. You don't have to pay extra for that. You just kind of turn the camera. I think you guys know that, but I guarantee you this hasn't happened just once. It's happened many times where someone has shown me some images that they're proud of. Maybe it's on a vacation. That happens a lot. And every single image was horizontal. Every one of them. Now, if the subject, all the subjects that they photographed looked best that way, fine. But I clearly saw several that would have looked much better as a vertical, at least from my point of view. And so I would ask, and they're like, oh, I didn't even think of that. Cameras come in vertical too. So yeah, I'm being silly, but that's actually the truth. I've come across people, or just come across images. All right, so use your environment to make a frame for your subject. Trees, arches, walls, a frame for your subject to help draw attention to what it is you're trying to convey. No lighting extremes. If you can help keep your subject out of extreme bright light or harsh shadows, you probably have an advantage there, unless your goal is to have a more dramatic look. Do what it takes. Do whatever it takes to get the shot, as long as it's not dangerous. It's not going to hurt anybody. Do what it takes. I'm not saying get out in the street when you're doing street photography. You probably don't want to do that. But do what it takes. And there's other things you don't want to do. Like, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was about 16, we did road trips when I was in high school, and we would go all over the place. This particular time was in Colorado, and one of the many places we visited while we were there was the Royal Gorge. I bet some of you have been there. Pretty place. I mean, there's a bridge that goes over this gorge, and it is deep. It's pretty surprising. How deep it is. I don't know how deep it is. It's just impressive. And we were not on the bridge. I don't even know if you can drive on that bridge, but we were not on the bridge. We were in an area where you could see the bridge. We had driven over to this area. There's just a little cutout on the road, I guess. Maybe there's a parking area. It's been a long time. So we parked and we went over to the edge, and you know those the railings, the fences that they put up. Yeah, you're not supposed to cross over those.
Right.
16-year-olds may or may not follow that direction, but I went over it and went down the hill, the side of the cliff, down a little bit, so I could get a better photograph of the Royal Gorge Bridge. And I did. I got a pretty good photograph of it. Right about the time my mother realized that I had just gone down the side of the cliff, she freaked out. And all of a sudden I realized this probably is a scary situation. It never crossed my mind before. I was just going to get the right shot, the image that I wanted, the image I had in my head. This is where I needed to be in order to get it. Don't do that to your parents.
I've done a similar thing. I used to photograph bands, and I'm pretty small. I'm only about 5 foot. And I used to like shooting them from the crowd. Well, sometimes that's hard when everybody seems to be a lot higher than I am. So I went and climbed the scaffolding at an outdoor amphitheater, and I still couldn't get it from the height that I was. But I kind of figured if I hung upside down and hung from the rail and shot, it would be. I did, but which was kind of cool. I did get an internship offer for an independent record label who said I was really dedicated.
Yeah.
And like, at that point, I was in college, and then the time they contacted me, I was 8 months pregnant. So I was like, well, I would love to, but somehow being 8 months pregnant and just the idea of my water breaking during that kind of setup was just not ideal. So, so I became more cautious as I became a parent about, shots like that. But
Yeah.
We've done some. I've had a friend with me. Car broke down on an overpass here, and you're one of the highest overpasses in the city. And so he just grabbed his camera and started shooting while we're out there, because it's a rare opportunity to be right there. It's really
Yeah.
scary when you saw how many cars are coming in and how fast they're coming around this turn. But, again, it's a rare opportunity to be up there. So dangerous, yeah, it's just, and you don't think about it when you start seeing the shot. Like it's a little bit of a tunnel vision because you see frame the shot in your head and you're not, like I said, when you have that tip about be like looking around your environment, I thought that was almost going to be a cautionary one. Like, don't step so far
Yeah,
back on the side of the Grand Canyon that you go off the Grand Canyon kind of thing. But
that's good
yeah,
advice because you've heard we've all heard stories
yeah.
about that kind of thing happening.
As selfies have become a big thing.
Yes.
You hear about it, and etiquette on shooting, really, because there's times where the keep outs are there for a reason. Sometimes it is to protect, the flora and fauna of everything there. There's just certain grass you don't want to be stomping on, or seedlings that are being planted, and that's why it is
Yeah.
there. And it's funny because people will take pictures of photographers going over, and it's like they're trampling on these little seedlings of rare flowers or stuff like that. So like I said, being aware of the environment and is a big thing.
Did you hear about one of the national parks changing their rules on photographers?
Oh no.
So now, if you're not a portrait or wedding photographer, you may not even know this exists. But portrait and wedding photographers were charged for doing portrait work or weddings at a national park. It was $300 to, and it still is at all the other parks. But it's $300 plus 3% of whatever it is that you charged your client, and you had to hire an official observer to make sure you didn't do anything wrong. And it seems like there was one other thing. You had to fill out a permit and send your $300 in. And well, that rule, there's been a reversal on that, and you no longer have to do any of those things. And it's in review for all the other parks, and so that may be something that goes away. So
Something I see a lot of photographers ask in photo groups if they need a permit to shoot at certain places, and I when I was a kid, I'd never even thought about that. I would just shoot wherever.
Mm-hmm. Now it depends on what you're doing. If you're just a tourist passing through, then that's they want you to do that. But there's a couple of reasons, and some are obvious. Like there are photographers and clients who do things that other people would realize was not something to do. They should be doing it, like the missions here in San Antonio. It's $100. Maybe it's a 125 to photograph there. But that's been a relatively recent thing, like within the past 10, 15 years. Prior to that, any photographer, anytime could photograph their, bridal portrait or family portrait or whatever, whenever they felt like it. But some photographers either encouraged or allowed their clients to get on top of things. These walls, these buildings that are, at the missions are about 300 years old. You walk on those, you break them. So you would think that most people would realize that's not a smart thing to do, but they would get up on top of them. And so because of the mistakes and I put that in the category of the photographer mistake, because you're in control. Even if they did it on their own, you get them off as quickly as possible. You don't photograph them up there. But so I definitely put the fault with the photographer, and that's why they started charging, was because of damage that was done to the walls at the missions.
Oh. Yeah, like I said, it only takes one or two people to kind of ruin it for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going. Yeah.
All right. So number 7, lighting direction. If possible, I want you to walk around your subject, just see how it looks. There's multiple reasons to do that, but one is lighting. Observe when the light is behind the subject or coming towards the camera. Some items like the petals of a flower will have a wonderful glow. I guess I need to share my screen. There we go. So you can follow me right here. Some subjects like the petals of a flower will have a wonderful glow depending on the direction of the light. If you're underneath, let's say you're underneath the petals and the light's coming through, or you're just behind it, you can backlight the subject, making it kind of cool in some instances. Remember, clouds are always moving. This can be a pain if you're photographing something with the clouds over now and then those clouds move away. Well, you might have a problem. If you're a portrait photographer, you're photographing people and it's going back, but it's going between over the clouds covering the sun and the clouds not covering the sun. That can be a real pain. So how do you deal with that? I would suggest for a lot of photographers, just put your camera in the A for aperture priority. Choose the aperture that you want, the depth of focus that you want, and allow your camera to choose the shutter speed for you. That's how I would suggest for a lot of photographers. Not all the time. That's a very general suggestion. What happens though if your sky looks washed out? I mean, there's lots of images. Everybody has seen them where that beautiful blue sky looks white or pretty darn close to it. The brighter the light, the more washed out it's going to look. So maybe don't photograph in the direction of the sun if you don't want the sky to look washed out. Or consider a neutral density filter or a polarizing filter. So there's different filters that can help with that. Number 8, wait, slow down. If you want to photograph a butterfly, in my opinion, the best way to photograph a butterfly is not to chase the butterfly. There's a pretty one, and you keep following it. Find the prettiest flower and just wait. I guarantee you he's going to find it. So get your camera set up, put it on a tripod, get yourself situated, and it will come. Number 9, distance. The closer your subject, the more clarity, detail, intimacy, and personality. I like to get close and use even a macro lens, depending on what I'm photographing. Not with people. I don't need to see every pore in their nose. But with flowers, with rocks, with trees, with bark, with water, with lots of different things. I like to use a macro and get close with bugs. And I like also to use different types of lenses, like a wide angle, like a telephoto. Distance. Number 10, mood. As I said at the very beginning, the best photographs bring out emotion and convey a story that causes greater understanding. Even if your subject's not a person, personify them. Think of their point of view, their feelings, their environment. What do they see? So you come across a big, cool looking boulder. What does it see? I mean, sure, it doesn't. But your photograph can be pretty darn interesting if you will take on those thoughts of personifying your subject. Go be your subject for a little while. What does it see from every angle? What does it see when it's looking up? What does it see when it's looking down? What about left and right? Look, walk around it. What does it see? What does it feel like? Am I crowded in by the trees around me? Tell that story. Do I get to see the morning light and then the rest of the day I'm in shade? Tell that story. Personify your subject. Number 11, equipment. You don't need a high-end camera to create amazing images. Here's an old cliche that still applies. Good images come from good photographers. Now that I've said that, there are some pieces of equipment that are going to help enhance your art. I mentioned one already, a tripod. And as you can see here, even if you have the hands of a surgeon, at least the stereotype, you're going to get better results with a tripod. Yes, I understand sometimes it's going to be a pain to walk around with it, and sometimes on purpose you don't. When my boys and I and my brother and two of his kids, decided to take a hike to what I call the top of Texas. It's Guadalupe Peak in far west Texas, just south of Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. About 30 minutes south of there is the highest point in Texas. I believe it's 8,700 feet. So, if you're talking about Colorado, that's nothing. But it's the highest point in Texas. And it's a drop off of 3,000 feet from the valley floor to the peak. It's 3,000 feet. So that's pretty significant. So we decided to take this walk, and I would recommend it to you guys. However, there is a sign at the beginning of this hike that says strenuous. And it goes into a little bit of detail. If you're having any heart issues, concerns, do not take this hike. It's a totally doable path. There's no rock climbing in it. There are paths everywhere. There's no railings, even at the areas where it's a 500-foot drop off or more. There's no railing, and at some areas it's 3 feet wide. And there's some scary areas if that kind of thing scares you. But man, is it a fantastic hike. You can see so far in so many areas. Oh man, beautiful hike. But it was one of those hikes where you don't want to take a tripod with you. It's going to be a pain to take a tripod with you. And so I have a walking stick that has a tripod thread on the bottom of it. And so I put my camera on my walking stick. So that's how I dealt with that. Next, flash. There is a sweet spot for a flash. Now that's either an accessory flash or that pop-up flash, 8 to 12 feet from your subject. Anything closer, a lot of times it's going to be too much. You do have control over it. You can reduce the amount of power coming from it, but as far as its auto settings, and you create too much light, generally speaking, when it's closer than 8 feet. And when it's further than 12, maybe 15, you have so little light that it just doesn't do anything. It's just not enough unless you can choose a flash that has more power. When it comes to outdoors on a bright sunny day, use it to fill in the shadows that the sun has created. Lenses. Touched on this a little bit ago, and I'll touch on it just a little bit more. And I have a class that's totally 2 hours about choosing a lens, but just a quick overview. Choose different focal lengths. You'll be amazed at how different photographs look simply by changing this one tool. In my Photo 101 class number 5, we talk about lenses. It's 2 hours about lenses. I have another class that's only lenses alone. You could take separately. But in Photo 101 session 5, we talk about lenses, and I give a homework assignment. And in this homework assignment, I show how lenses really work, not just zooming in, because you've got zoom lenses and you've got fixed focal length lenses, prime lenses versus variable focal length lenses, which nobody calls it that. Everybody calls that zoom. So it just means you have the ability to change your focal length, zoom in on your subject. Photograph your subject in different focal lengths, get closer or further away. In this homework assignment, I have them photograph someone who is standing on their own driveway. And then across, I'm picturing in your mind that right across that driveway is someone, the other side of the street is someone else's driveway and their closed garage door. And when you photograph them with a wide angle lens, and you're relatively close to them, imagine in your mind that you're close to them for the wide angle and you back up for the telephoto so that you can get them the subject the same size. The change in the background is significant though. With the wide angle, you can see the whole house in the background. With the telephoto, while your subject looks identical, no change. Very little change, I should say. Your background changes dramatically. It looks like they are so close to that other across the street neighbor's garage door that it looks like they're standing like 2 feet away from that neighbor's garage door. The story changes based on the tools you use. And lenses is one of many examples of that. You can totally change a story. In photography, you can make a story untrue based on knowledge or lack of knowledge of your tools. I can make a photograph lie. Easy. I can photograph something that's in motion, but stop its motion. It wasn't stopped. I can make a car on the highway look like it was parked on the highway. I could send that photograph into the police department and say, we've got a problem. People are stopping on the highway right here. I've got photographs to prove it. They're going to come out and check it out because those photographs are convincing. You guys who believe that photographs never lie? Yeah. Photographic evidence does not mean that what you're seeing in the photograph is true. It could mean that. But there are so many things you can do to change the story on to change using your tools to change the story. Use them creatively, not for nefarious reasons. You have the power. Wide angle lenses, creating sweeping landscapes, but the sun will only be tiny, tiny in those photographs. What about a telephoto lens? Zooming in, then the sun might get huge. You could photograph a cheetah while you're on your safari trip to Africa, and you photograph that cheetah, and you've got this long focal length lens, say a 600 millimeter lens. So that cheetah is up on this little hill, and the sun is this big disc behind it. Maybe you make it a silhouette where the sun goes red and everything else is black. You just have those two colors. Man, that's cool. But you can only do that with a really long focal length lens. In a wide angle lens, the sun's going to be tiny. In fact, it's going to be hidden by the cheetah unless you change your angle to make it show up on the side. Totally different stories with different lenses and where you are relative to your subject. Filters. And this is the last part. A filter can cause some reflections that will not enhance the look of your images. In many cases, it may be best to take off all filters. However, there are two filters that I recommend, that a minimum of two. There's some other ones, but for the most part, I recommend that you have two filters in your toolbox, your physical toolbox, your camera case. A polarizing filter. There's an effect and a side effect of every single tool available in photography. The effect of a polarizing filter is to reduce or enhance reflection. So I can purposefully see the reflection better, or I can purposefully reduce the reflection so I can see through it. The side effect is an increase in contrast. Now it does get a little bit darker too, because it's kind of like sunglasses, polarized sunglasses, but you can. It does get a little bit darker, so you do lose a little bit of light. And if it's a bright sunny day, then who cares? It doesn't matter. But when you're inside, you generally don't use a polarizing filter, although there's times when it's totally appropriate because it helps convey your story. So if I want to purposefully, my subject is the reflection, I want a polarizing filter to enhance that. And the opposite is true too. The other thing I recommend is a neutral density filter, or the graduated version of the neutral density filter, meaning it changes slowly as it goes from one side to the other. There's nothing here, and it gets darker and darker and darker as it goes up. And this is to control light when I have a situation where there's too much of it. So this filter darkens the sky, allows the camera to get enough light to expose the foreground if you'd have a graduated one. But it reduces the amount. Let's say it also helps me to convey motion during the day. Let's say I come across on my hike a beautiful waterfall, and I want to choose a long shutter speed so I can get that water going nice and flowy over the rocks. If I want that longer shutter speed to convey motion, then if I do that without a neutral density filter, I receive too much light and you can't see it. It's just the biggest white bright rectangle you've ever seen. I don't need a beautiful white rectangle. I need a photograph of that waterfall. And so if I have this regular neutral density, not a graduated, a regular neutral density, I'm reducing the amount of light coming into my camera so that I can convey the motion. There's a ton more stuff about filters, about lenses, and about all these other things that we've learned today. But this is an overview of things to consider so that you can create amazing outdoor photographs. I hope you've enjoyed this.
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. When you're talking about equipment, Jim, there's things that I was interviewing a photographer for one of our Geo Galleries Fresh Friday episodes, and he was talking to us about his filters, but also weights for his tripod, because some of the places he would go perch up to go shoot some landscapes was really gusty and windy. And so he had some weights and stuff there, things that he would take to do that. What other things outside of just your regular photographic equipment are good when you're going on nature, besides like, maybe hiking gear if you need to hike up onto something, but what are some other things that you have found over the years with nature photography that
That
some
particular one's a good example. That is an example of generally a travel pod, meaning a very lightweight tripod. The heavier ones you really don't ever have that problem with. It depends on to what extent. But bringing weights with you is a good idea. I would say bring a plastic bag with you instead and fill it with the rocks that are right there in your environment, or the sand or dirt or whatever, and fill that and hang that from the bottom of your tripod. A lot of tripods have a hook underneath the neck, and so you can just hang that there. If they don't, well, then you can, put it between the legs. So that's a really good for. I don't really like travel tripods because of they can fall over just with a gust of
yeah.
wind.
Mhm.
And the way to combat that is with some type of weight, and you can do that however you want to. So that's a good one. Another one is with photographing flowers, because they are just moving, having something that holds that flower still. And the example I gave earlier was, it was just and I've never used this, I've just seen it. It was something that connected to their tripod leg, went out and had just a little clip that held the stem still. And it would, they put it just under where the photograph was going to be created, just under the frame, so that it didn't show up in the photograph. So another, cool tool. If you're photographing something that's relatively close, putting your own background behind it. So you have something with you. It could be just a piece of paper that you put so you can have a white background. It could be that poster board that I mentioned earlier that's black. I've done it with blue poster board, royal blue, or maybe it's a navy also. And so there are, little things, little hacks based on what it is that you have with you. A lot of photographers will have bean bags in their camera case. And that is for weight purposes, but it's also to give your camera a place to sit. So if you don't have a tripod, or it's not appropriate for that space, and you have an uneven surface, well, you can put this bean bag and just shape it so that your camera's level. So there's a bunch of those
Little
camera
tricks of the trade.
hacks.
Yeah. There's also kind of like creating your own landscape. I've seen photographers who do action figure photography. So they get low. They've created their landscape using, maybe going, like I said, that small. They're able to add in stuff and create this whole other world. And I've seen some photographers who shoot that stuff as a almost basically like it's going to be a backdrop, because they do like fairy photography, and they'll take the pictures of the subjects and then they go drop them into these photographs of the flowers that they've shot, like you were saying, shooting an angle up so that you're able to create that illusion that, this is the world that, these people that you're dropping in Photoshop are in. And those are some really neat aspects. I like when people kind of get creative like that and do their own landscape that they're kind of making, and you can do that anywhere. It looks like some of these people have done stuff like in places where it's near landfills and created some really beautiful things. And it's just like, wow, when you look at the whole area around them, and so urban, and they're able to create like a forest or something. It's just amazing to see people's creativity in creating their own landscapes there too. So
I like that example. I've seen quite a bit of that here lately.
mhm.
Fun thing to do, just move around. One of the assignments that I give in Photo 102 is to I call it Wow Me. That's the name of the assignment, is Wow Me. So they've already done Photo 101. They've got their basics down, and so they're moving into 102. And I think it's the second class that I do this on, of 102. And I tell them to go outside, give them about 20 minutes, go outside, walk around, and photograph whatever is in this environment and just wow me with it. And so since I've done this so many times, I've seen pretty much everything. But my favorite ones are, and uh, there is it's a strip center that my office was in. And so it has 2 rows, and then it has a strip of grass, and then the access road, and then strip of grass, and then the highway. If you get down low enough, you can make all the cars, the road disappear. And what you have is this field of grass. And because there's a road in between, but there's grass again, and the road's slightly lower. So if you get low enough, you can totally eliminate it. And it just looks like this huge field of grass with one tree sitting in the middle of it. And with the sun going down or wherever, it doesn't have to be going down. It could be a beautiful blue sky too, but it just looks like this lone tree in the middle of a field. And if you show that photograph to someone, they'd say, well, where was this?
Yeah.
And based on where it was photographed, I don't think anyone would believe it was photographed unless they knew a little something about photography and the tools that both physical and mental tools. This is a mental tool that are available to you.
Yeah, the creating spaces, it's amazing. Like I said, so even if you can't go to amazing destinations, you can kind of create them wherever you're at.
Sounds like
So,
the beauty in your own backyard assignment
yeah,
that I give.
yeah. What do you have? Did you have any announcements you want to talk about? Any of your photo essay things that are coming up, and the Colorado trip? I don't know if it's still available for people to join up with you,
We
or
don't have any tickets available.
okay, so
So
you have
darn it.
next
If
time.
someone wants to do a private one and they want to, pay a whole lot more, then I might go. I might be willing to go with them. But we're the next topic for photo essay is a topic that you guys are covering too, and that's NFTs.
Mhm.
So non-fungible tokens, which is a little bit of a confusing thing because it's something that exists online. And we have someone who is a financial planner and how he includes that in his financial planning. And so he's going to talk about how to create them. He has created some and he has bought some, and they're part of his financial planning. It's part of his portfolio, his NFTs. Of course, that is a more difficult thing to plan, but it's something that at least appears to at this point that we're moving into.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to, claim that this is the way to make $1 million. He's going to claim, if you've got a little bit of extra and it's not going somewhere, try this because you may not be spending much now and it may become worthless later. But it may just shoot through the roof also. So why not try it?
Yeah.
It's just one more, as far as the creators, it's just one more option that we have available to us.
Yeah.
And we get more control over it too, because if they sell it, we get a cut of what it is that they sell it for. And so that's never happened before. And anytime we've sold our work, if they resell our work, we don't get a cut back from it. We don't even know that exists. And with NFTs, that's part of the deal.
The blockchain just kind of keeps it. Our artist talked about it on Tuesday, was talking, we went at it at the approach of, for art and photography, another stream of income,
Yes.
NFTs. And we were talking about the blockchain creating that legacy of basically like a certificate of authenticity to follow your digital image on there, or your digital collectible.
Yes.
So it was a really interesting aspect. And, he was talking more as an artist who he goes, I know nothing about coding or anything like that. So, for me to say I've gotten in and I've gotten he was talking about his OpenSea, he has on Foundation and stuff like that.
Good.
And it was a good exploration. And like I said, for photographers and for an artist, this is definitely a new avenue of income that we'll see happening. And it changes almost weekly right now, what's going on with it, and it's like as technology does. So it is something you need to stay, as he said, diligent on. So it's a great thing. Anything else coming up with you that you want to kind of?
Well, I have a photo 101 that's coming up on April 18th. You do have to be in San Antonio in order to take advantage of it, because this is in person. And we're doing it like we've only done it this way once before. It's fun. There's 6 2-hour sessions, and we do them on Mondays, 6 Mondays consecutive in a row. We'll record them, so if you happen to miss one, you won't miss the information. But every single one is a field trip. We go to a different place each time. The place is geared to, because it is ideal for the subject we're teaching. And so it'll be mostly on the northwest side of town, not all of them, but most of them will be on the northwest side of town, like the Dominion Country Club or the Elan Hotel, or when we do shutter speeds, we're going to go to a place that has 5 huge, really big waterfalls, and that is the parking lot of the Bass Pro Shop. And so we go to the place that the subject that we're teaching that day is ideal for learning. So that's April 18th. And you can find more information by going to landersphotoschool.com, landersphotoSchool.com.
Okay, and we'll have that link right there in the YouTube as well. I also linked in your episode of the Magic Hour in the chat as well. So if anybody wants to go back and look at that. Our next Photo Tips Monthly will be first Thursday, May 5th. And we're going to be talking about something that kind of goes with this, how to photograph sunsets. So, you can kind of, the filters that you were talking about, I've had like I said, that photographer telling me about the filters he's used, because he's shoot Canon walls and stuff like that. So the sun hits really harsh. So he's actually had that filter from darker at the bottom.
Graduated neutral density.
Yeah. So I was like, wow, you don't think about that. I mean, and James were just talking before we started up, is that, a lot of photographers don't utilize filters in the shooting process as much anymore, because they try to go take care of all of that in post. And it's just like you said, another tool in the toolbox to use those filters. And
that's a really good point. There used to be thousands of filters.
Yeah.
Now the majority of those, yes, yeah, exactly. The majority of those should be done in post now, but there's a handful of things that just simply cannot be done in post.
Yeah.
And so, or not well. Some are just, it's a time savings to do them at camera, but can be done in post. But there's a handful of things that just can't be done in post, in the post-production process. So in knowing those tools causes you, I mean, it's interesting, because I come across people who say, well, I know enough, I don't need any classes. And then you share this new thing and they open their minds. So you have this knowledge base, and you may feel like it's a good amount, and it probably is, but there's this area that's beyond it, things you might have heard of, but have never employed. And then there's the thing that's beyond that, which is vast. That is the largest amount of information, is the thing you don't even know you don't know. And that's why taking classes, continuing your education, never stopping that. I still take classes, and I've been teaching since 1997. I got my degree in 1991 in photography. But I still take classes because I'm well aware that here's my knowledge base. Here's the things I'm aware of, but I don't use. And then the amount of space that's beyond that I didn't even know I didn't know is vast. And so taking classes causes that to come into my knowledge zone.
So what would you cover in this with photographing sunset, if you want to kind of give a little bit of a teaser to that?
Yeah, so this would be about the tools that you would use, the both mental and physical. So the lenses that are ideal for certain situations, the filters that I'm going to recommend. I often recommend a lot of people have the UV filter on. I recommend taking that one off when photographing sunsets and sunrises, just because it has the potential to add in a reflection, and it's not real beneficial when photographing sunsets and sunrises. I'll talk about photographing people in front of a sunset or a sunrise, because that can throw off your light meter. And that's another thing. Your light meter is often wrong with sunsets and sunrises. Now, wrong based on your opinion of what looks best. It's still correct based on what it's trying to accomplish. Its goal is to average the scene to middle gray. If we were to take it, turn it into black and white paint and all the shades of gray in between, your camera's meter always winds up with the halfway point between solid black and solid white, middle gray. It's called 18% gray, but it's easier to just say middle gray because that makes sense. But for those of you who want the technical term, it's 18% gray because that's how much light is reflected off of that surface. We'll talk about that. And then reflectors, how to add light if you want to, because if you're photographing that someone in front or a thing, it may be a statue or something that you're photographing in front of that beautiful sunset, you may want to have some of that light being reflected into the subject. And so using reflectors, both a white reflector, a silver reflector, and a gold, but mostly just the white and the gold is what I recommend. But I do recommend a 5-in-1 filter. But those kind of things, the different tools you're going to use, the time of day, and how to plan that kind of thing to make sure you're in the right place at the right time. And so that even if you're planning this 2 years in advance, for instance, here just west of San Antonio, in Fredericksburg, in 2024, so 2 years away, the total eclipse of the sun is going to happen. And if you're at, let's say, the Enchanted Rock or Troyes Estate, which is right next to Enchanted Rock, if you're there at that time, you're going to see it go dark, totally dark during that time. So, by the way, if you don't have your reservations for somewhere in 2024, get them soon because they're going to run out of. They may have already run out of space, but that is something to see. We're going to see it very well from San Antonio. It just won't be 100%. It'll be like 97%, 98%, which is pretty spectacular. But yeah, if you can get a little further west, that's the time to do it.
Oh.
So we can plan out when things, that's one way that we know is through the software. Now before that, it was done without software. Who knows how that was figured out? It's way beyond me. And when it comes to math, but we can use these software tools to help us know when is the right time to be where we need to be. If you're photographing a building, a friend of mine was telling me a story about photographing a building in downtown San Antonio, and he wanted sunlight on the surface of the building. And so he was looking to see what time of day. Well, he found out, well, it's not any time of day. It's so he went to to one of the online tools, one of the apps, and he found out there is never a time ever that the front of this building is in sunlight. Never. He was amazed by this. I can't believe there's never a time. It was a north-facing building that because of a couple of different factors, partially because of buildings that are around it also, that there is never a time that the front of the building, the north-facing building, there is never a time when it is totally in sunlight. Now, partial, yes. 100%, never.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did he overcome it? What did he do? Did he go ahead and create
he
the look?
he really researched it and he was trying to find something, but I think he wound up just letting him know that because it was an assignment that they hired him to photograph the building and they wanted it in sunlight, and he showed them that your building is never in the sun.
Yeah.
So he had that to back him up because this software actually showed the building. It overlaid the algorithm of where the sun is going to be onto the surface of the building. And he showed them several years into the future. It's never, ever in solid sun.
Wow. Well, unless they knock down another building.
Yeah, that may be true.
That may be the only way to get the shot. Well, Jim, we appreciate your time and that you take to do all of these with us. I guess we're glad that they get to be archived on here. We just, like I said, there's just not an amount of words to say thank you enough for all of these that you do. We really appreciate it. We want to remind everybody too that we have a 40% off canvas sale going on through tomorrow. Like that, I know, yeah. So if you've never had your works put on canvas, this is a good time to try it. Or if you never have gone big on your canvas, this is a good time to try it with that 40% off sale. So it's just go onto our website. We have the code there that you use in checkout. And we'll see you guys next month with Jim. Jim, thanks again. And we'll let you end the the session.
Well, thank you again, Melissa. Thank you, James. And thank you for those who are taking your time to watch. I appreciate you and your willingness to continue your education, open-mindedness for that, and hope to see you next month at the Photo Tips Monthly, where we're going to be talking about sunsets and sunrises. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.